Hey guys, what's going on? I am Tim Bursons from Amplified Metabolism, and today's video we're going to talk about the concept of excitation, especially within the cells, but we're also going to tie this into how that affects your actual mood. And not only how the excitation of cells, especially in your nervous system, will affect your mood and will affect your functioning, but how your functioning and perception from the level of the mood will actually have a reverse effect on your cells. They're going in this cycle all the time. Your nervous system, which we could consider your mind, your brain, is affecting your body. But then at the same time, the molecules of your body and the systems that have been habituated, those systems are then feeding back into the brain to create similar circumstances. So when we've talked in the last few videos about how your emotions affect your health, the big point here is that we really want to use the mind in order to cut that cycle, and instead of continuing to perpetuate something that is negative, change our perceptions. The easiest way to do this, change our perception, change our mood, and therefore have the body start to come along with us and start to change as this cycle is moving. But of course, that's only half the spectrum. If you eat better foods and you perform exercise and you do restful activities and all of the good stuff that we talk about on this channel as far as a healthy lifestyle, a healthy diet, then you will be changing your body on the physical level, which will now have a feedback up into your mind. So if you can really help to this improvement from both sides, from both the mind and the body, then you start to get this cycle moving really quickly and you'll see your health improve massively. All right, so diving into this video, what is excitation? What are we talking about when we're talking about cells getting excited? Well, basically, a cell will respond to its environment based on what is happening in the moment. Different molecules can make that cell more excitable or less excitable. If it's less excitable, we call it inhibitory. If those molecules are making the cell more excitable, that means it's more likely to react. It's more likely to flux the minerals and proteins in the membrane to cause a movement of fluid through the cell. So basically what this means is that if you are in a very excitable state, you are going to respond to the environment far faster. Now, this can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing. And I'm going to lay out 3 different scenarios along this spectrum to help you understand when it's a good thing and when it's a bad thing, where excitation might be too high, but then on the other side where inhibition might be too high. So to start this off, we've talked before about how the cell has 2 different types of metabolism, the stress metabolism and the healthy metabolism. The healthy metabolism we have said is respiration. It's the efficient metabolism. It produces a lot of energy. But when a stress comes that overcomes the cell's ability to create energy, it will switch into the glycolytic metabolism, which is the stress metabolism. This is the cheap, the quick, the inefficient energy that is great in the short term, but if it's left on too long, it will start to degrade your cell's ability to create from the respiratory metabolism, therefore degrading your cell's overall ability to create energy. If your cell has a low ability to create energy, then obviously everything that happens in the environment, all the stresses that happen in the environment, are going to be more than the energy the cell can produce. And so it's going to continue this glycolytic metabolism because that's the only way that it can produce enough energy in the moment to overcome whatever it needs to overcome. So we have this sort of spectrum where on the very low end, there's no respiratory metabolism. On the very high end, there's tons of respiratory metabolism. So we can kind of see on the spectrum that you fall somewhere in it. Let's just put an arbitrary marker so that we can understand this concept. You fall somewhere in here. Everything on this side is respiratory metabolism. Anything above here will end up becoming the glycolytic metabolism. Stay up here too long, this line moves this way. More glycolytic, less respiration. Stay under this side for too long, or stay on this side for long enough, you'll actually increase the respiration and increase your cell's ability to produce energy in the long run. So when we're talking about excitation, we're basically talking about a cell moving beyond its ability to create that energy. This is the side of excitation. This is the side of inhibition. So if we're going to become too excited in our cells, and remember, this is also very analogous to your mind and your body. If you can imagine a cell being like a smaller version of you, and all of the smaller versions of you that are your cells make up the entity that you are as an organism, then a lot of this starts to make sense. And you also understand how the energy that you produce as an organism is also affecting all the cells in a fractal-like pattern where they all are holograms reflecting the whole. So when we're talking about this spectrum, we're talking about you and your metabolism somewhere in the middle. If you are in an overly excited state, that means that you've crossed this barrier of the cell, of the amount of energy that the cell can produce. Because you've crossed that barrier, now you're going to start moving into the stress state. This is where you're trying to use that cheap, quick, inefficient energy just to overcome the stress. In the psychosocial emotional state, we can kind of say that you imagine you're out in the grocery store and you see a celebrity, a famous person that you've always looked up to, and immediately you get nervous. And you go and you want to talk to this person, but you're so nervous that you're flustered and you can't actually do things efficiently, and you're worried about what you might say, and you're kind of like stifled because you're so excited. So you have, in that situation, you have surpassed what you can normally handle as a person in a social setting. Well, in the same sense, the cell gets overly excited, it moves past what it can really handle, and so now it's just trying to do whatever it can to overcome that stress. This is literally how stress happens. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, if you're too inhibited, that means that even though you could produce this much energy from the respiratory metabolism, you're still only going to produce this much energy or this much energy. So while this is a healthy way to produce the energy, the quantity is not there. You're producing energy in a high quality way with no quantity, whereas on this side, you're producing energy in a low quality way with high quantity. And really, when we get to that balance point in the middle is where we have both high quality and high quantity. So the way that we can think about this is that if you were to sleep all day long and never really wake up, and when you do wake up, you're just so lull and you don't even ever really like get up and get going, then you're going to have this inhibition. You're not going to have enough energy to actually supply the activities that you need in order to, have a good life, to have a life that is fulfilling. Another example we can use here is public speaking. If you go out and you are in front of an audience speaking, well, a lot of people would be too excited. They'd go too far to this side and become too excited, and they wouldn't be able to speak well. They'd be flustered. They'd be worried, thinking about, well, what are they thinking? Am I doing a good job, et cetera, et cetera. On the other side of the spectrum, if they were too inhibited, then they'd come up here and they'd just be like, hey guys, what's going on? They wouldn't have that energy. They wouldn't instill that inspiration and energy and motivation into the audience. So on that side of the spectrum, you need to increase the energy. But if you go too far, now you're going to be too excited. It's this balance point that we're looking for. And as soon as you can find that balance point, that's where things start to really click in. So from the chemical point of view, things like glycine, which is one of the main amino acids, one of the main anti-inflammatory amino acids found in gelatin, collagen, and bone broth, that amino acid is very inhibitory. It helps to move your system down into the respiration metabolism and reduce the overall energy needs of the cell at that moment. This is related to GABA, which is another one. It's very important in sleep. And I have a suspicion, I don't know this for sure, that melatonin somewhere plays in there because it is part of the body's circadian rhythm telling it that it's time to go to sleep. On the other side, we have glutamate, which is one of the main excitatory neurotransmitters that will pump your cells into this really triggerable state. They're very triggerable by the environment. So for most people, they're not going to really need to have more excitation for the most part. They're already in a state that is too stressed with too much glycolytic metabolism, and what they really need is to have a decrease in the energy needs of the cell so that they can come back into baseline with respiration. Now, caffeine from coffee or from green tea or even sodas and chocolate, caffeine is a excitatory neurotransmitter. So it actually will increase the energy requirements of the cell. Now, caffeine, of course, isn't necessarily bad for you. Caffeine has a lot of really good qualities to it. The question is, are you coming from a place where you're moving your excitation up to balance so that you're moving out of a highly inhibited, low energy state into a very healthy, high energy respiratory state? Or are you already so low on the spectrum that now when you take caffeine, you're moving into this glycolytic metabolism, and every day when you're having your 3 or 4 cups of coffee, that's your I need this coffee to sustain myself type of thing, then you're moving yourself into that stress state and continually pumping that glycolytic metabolism without allowing your body to rest. So when we understand this, we can start to see how when we're in a disease state, when we're in a long-term stress state, which we can call the low metabolism state, the hypometabolism state, hypothyroid state, that really what's happening is that you have stressed your body out so much that you've moved this bar down low enough that now you need a lot of inhibition in order to only create from the respiratory metabolism so that we can start building it back up. And the real point here is that if your bar is here and you're only producing energy here, there's no stimulus to help create more respiration. But if your bar is here and you're here, now you're actually pumping the bar down. There's a quote from a famous Olympian as far as training goes that said, I would rather be 10% undertrained than 1% overtrained. And this analogy works perfect here. If you're 1% too excited, you're in the glycolytic metabolism pushing it down. Now, that's not going to have a huge effect on you, but if it's sustained in the long term, then it will have some negative implications. But if you're 10% quote unquote undertrained in the inhibition, then you're still all producing the majority of your metabolism from the respiratory metabolism, and therefore you can help to be healing and producing the good chemicals and neurotransmitters. If you are below in the inhibition side too much, you're still producing good energy. You're still producing the right hormones. They're all just low. If you're here, you're actually producing the stress hormones when you're too far on this side of things. Now, another interesting tie-in here is a study called the Minnesota Starvation Study. And in this study, they basically, it was during World War II, I believe, and they had a bunch of people who were, I think, protesters who were willing to undergo a starvation experiment for 6 months. And they had very, very low calories. And they were able to measure their blood markers and get a bunch of really interesting data about what happens in the starvation stage. But one of the things they found that was so interesting, of course, their metabolic rates fell. Their bodies were sustaining themselves by holding on to as much calories as they could, dropped all the extraneous functions of the body. Healing was slower, sexual function was completely gone, immune function was reduced, all of these kinds of things. But what they found from the blood markers was that adrenaline was 40 times higher than it is in a normal person. And in fact, in these starved people, they could give them a shot of adrenaline, a shot of epinephrine, and they would have no effect to it at all. Now, normally, if you give someone an EpiPen, they're going to wake up, they're going to have a big jolt. But these people had no response to this because their adrenaline was already so high that contextually, one extra little hit up wasn't that big of a deal. If you're here and I give you a hit here, that's a big deal. But if you're here and I give you a hit here, then it's not that big of a deal at all. So the difference is where this comes in. Another thing they found was that people would drink tons and tons and tons of coffee, like way more coffee than most people would. And we think of some of the reason for this is because when your thyroid's not functioning optimally and you're not creating energy through this respiratory metabolism, the only way you can feel good by having enough energy is to create more of the energy by artificially exciting your body into this higher state. So the way that I view this is that if you're going to continue to drink all this coffee, all this caffeine, and continue to excite yourself to stay in this high energy state, that's okay to make you feel good in the short term, but is it really helping you repair this respiratory metabolism in the long term? And so one of the big takeaways that I want to instill from this video, one of the best ways that I think that you can move yourself back down to create energy better and start healing is to replace 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day with 1 or 2 cups of bone broth. So the reason this is going to work is that the caffeine that is exciting you past this point is now going to be removed, therefore pulling you back to a healthy metabolism. And the glycine and the proline and the alanine and the anti-inflammatory amino acids that are found in bone broth are going to help pull you a little bit more into the inhibited state so that you are in this respiratory metabolism and not producing anything from the glycolytic metabolism. Now, this isn't to say that if your metabolism's good here that you shouldn't have bone broth because it's going to move you down. That's not what that means at all. What it means is that bone broth is a healing agent and caffeine is an exciting agent. And if you need to heal, you don't want to be excited. And if you want to be excited, you can still heal, but you just want to make sure that everything is in balance. So one of the best things you can do is first thing in the morning, start out with a warm cup of bone broth. And what you're going to end up finding is that warm drink that you're used to having as coffee, now having it as bone broth, you're going to feel very relaxed. You're going to feel very warm. You're going to start your day in a very calm place. The caffeine that you would normally be getting, you can still have a cup of coffee a day if you want. You can still have something a green tea or something like that if you want to. But if you can limit that caffeine, then you're going to start feeling a lot better because you're going to be in a state that's much more calm so that your body can heal back up to a place where it doesn't get stressed out at a higher energy output. Now, this is all from the nutritional and chemical side of it. But when we're talking about the mental emotional side of it, What this really means is that you want to start your day with more of something like meditation, because meditation is going to lower your brain waves out of beta down into alpha, maybe even down into theta. These are longer, slower brain waves. If beta is boom, 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 I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm focused, I'm doing this, that's beta. Okay, jumbled all over the place, focused. Alpha is much more like driving a car. You're kind of thinking, you're kind of flowing. Theta is very slow. You're very relaxed. And then below that is delta, where you're completely asleep. Some people can achieve delta in meditation, but for the most part, theta is where you're going to really get into with meditation, and mostly it's alpha. So the point being here that if you can start your day by slowing that down and putting kind of in training your brain into the slower brain wave while it's awake, then what happens is that when you go into the day and some stressor pops up that normally would trigger you, that would normally excite you. So think about that with the cells. The cells get triggered when they're in the excitable state. If you're in an excitable state, then the world can trigger you very easily. So by meditating, you're starting to entrain this lower brain wave so that when something comes in the world, you don't immediately jump. You don't immediately trigger. You respond. Instead of reacting, you respond. You look at it, you say, okay, all right, now given these scenarios, keeping my focus open so that I understand all of the things that, all the situations and aspects and circumstances of this specific event, now I have the information that I'm going to choose how to respond. Whereas if, say, the situation is someone yelling at you, if you're in a triggerable state and someone yells at you, then boom, you're going to start yelling back, or you're going to cower in fear, you're going to start crying, whatever it is, like something's going to happen because you're going to respond, you're going to trigger, you're going to, or not respond, you're going to react. You're going to react, you're going to be triggered, you're going to lose your cool, so to speak. Well, that's a really good way to think about this is, are you going to lose your cool? If you don't want to overstress your cells, are your cells going to lose their cool, or are they going to remain in the calm place that when some stressor comes up, they say, okay, I can handle this, keep going through, and now everything's fine? Or are they going to freak out and constrict and contract, and like we talked about in the last energy, restrict that life flow into this one present moment so that we can just overcome the stressor with this cheap, inefficient fuel? That's really the way you can think about this. So, of course, in this same sense, you don't necessarily want to avoid all excitation mentally. You do want to have things where you get engaged, where you get involved, where you kind of are, studying in that beta, high intellectual, high thinking mode. Of course, that's fine. The question is, are you doing it too much? And the bigger question is, have you done it so much that you have pushed your ability to stay in the calm state down so low that now almost everything is triggering you? And if that's the case, then you're going to need to spend some more time in this calmer state, which means more meditation, which means more bone broth. Similarly, it means avoiding things that are going to excite you too much, avoiding caffeine, avoiding stressful situations out in the world, or at least improving the way that you respond to them. And if you're able to do these things for long enough, then what you're going to actually start to find is that the things that used to overexcite you and cause you to contract will now become manageable by you. Now you will actually be able to go into those situations with complete confidence and ease without changing your state. You'll be able to go in and be unmoved by the outer circumstance. Now, in the same sense, your cells, when under some sort of chemical or physiological stress, will not be moved. They will stay in their healthy state. They won't contract and they won't freak out and get excited. So it's this same thing going back and forth, but it all comes from reducing the amount of excitation, increasing the amount of inhibition so that we can get to this nice place where we're producing energy in a really good way, where we are completely calm in our brain waves and we're able to handle life, and then slowly increasing that as it feels good to the point where we're not constricting, we're not contracting. Now, a good way to find this is, your balance for caffeine, for example. If you're going to be drinking caffeine and you start to get jittery and you feel like that anxious, and there's a certain feeling that comes along with overdoing caffeine that I think all of us have probably experienced at some point, where if we have had too many cups and then we keep craving more and more coffee because our bodies keep craving it, then we're going to keep pushing too far into that, and you can tell that you're getting really, really stressed out. You can tell that it's not good for you. It's not actually helping your body heal. And so it's this similar state that if we're, social situations cause you anxiety and cause you to stress out. Well, it's the same thing. Are you gonna keep going into these social situations and keep stressing out and keep becoming anxious too much? Or do you need to step back and say, okay, I can have a little bit of social time and build that up. And then as you build it up and as you don't overdo it, now a month from now, 2 months from now, you're out in a social situation for hours and hours and hours, and you have no problem with it at all, and you're just cool, calm, and relaxed and at ease. And that really comes from that training. It's the same way for your cells. And so we're starting to see this connection between the cells and between the person, and how the chemical nutritional is following the pattern of the mental, social, psychological. So all in all, we can take these pieces, we can combine them together, and we can create an overall lifestyle and an overall diet that start to work together to heal not only your body, but your mind. So now this mind-body connection from both sides is helping to ramp up your lifestyle to a higher and higher enjoyment of life, higher and higher energy, higher and higher information, more wisdom, more experience, more joy, more love, more peace, more gratitude, more courage, all of those good things. So with that, we are through for this video. I hope that you got a lot out of it. A lot of interesting tie-ins here, a lot of complex physiology made simple, but then tied into some psychosocial things, which is a really cool way to look at it. If you like this video, please give the thumbs up. Please subscribe for future updates. I will be posting on Monday to Friday and maybe some more if I feel like it. Make sure you leave any comments below if you have questions or you want to continue talking about these kinds of topics. Let me know if you like this stuff and if you want more of any specific type of information. I really like talking about the psychosocial connection and the mental connection and the consciousness and the spirituality and the physiology and the biochemistry and tying it all together. It's just so much fun to talk about. I also have a Patreon account below. If you enjoyed this video and you want to give a tip, tips are greatly appreciated. You can go over there and you can donate. Highly appreciated. No obligation at all, but of course I enjoy all of your support, and whether you donate or not, I really appreciate you guys as an audience. So with that, I am out of here. I hope that you all have a wonderful day. Please keep calm, enjoy your bone broth, don't overdo the caffeine. Have a good day, have a good life, have a good diet. Enjoy your bodies. Peace.